What's up, you guys? Welcome back to another Understanding Magic the Gathering video, and this time we're going to be talking about Mono Red and Commander. Now, in my previous Understanding Magic the Gathering videos, I did talk about mono colors. And through the perspective of a Commander player, I think it's best to do that because you have just so many different strategies to choose from and a wide variety of cards that you kind of have to because you're playing in a singleton format. But before I get into the video, first I would like to remind you that most of you who are watching right now are not actually subscribed to the channel. So please, I would really appreciate it if you did me the favor of hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. Thank you all so much. The first thing that you should understand about Mono Red and Magic the Gathering is that there is an inherent lack of precision. This means that with other colors, it's not as simple as you play a spell, you get the expected outcome. With red, it's more like you play a spell, something positive might happen for you, but it's also possible that something negative happens. This is going to be something that we return to later on in the video, because it does kind of apply to other things about red. But probably the best way to help you understand precision is getting something guaranteed. So if you pay 2 mana to tutor up a card with something like a demonic tutor, in red the equivalent is gamble. So you know there is a chance that you could be burned after playing that. You may actually have to discard the card that you search up, or discard something else in your hand that you didn't want to have to discard. The second thing that you should know about Mono Red in Magic the Gathering is that there is a moderate amount of card draw. I would say red is middle of the road, maybe 4th best when it comes to card draw among the colors. It's not as bad as white, but it certainly could be a lot better. Red will often draw you cards, but at the cost of discarding that many cards. And this goes all the way back to something like Wheel of Fortune, but you have a lot of newer cards where you pay a set amount of mana with the additional cost of having to discard 2 cards, draw 2 cards, discard 1 card, draw a card. There's a lot of that in red. It's still going to be good for a lot of decks, but nowhere near the kind of card draw that you're going to find in at least 3 of the other colors. The third thing that you should know about Mono Red and Magic the Gathering is that there are a ton of strong artifact synergies. It's interesting because as a mono color, it's a pretty viable strategy, given that we have some fun commander options like Duretti Scrap Savant, Felden of the Third Path, and even Bosch Iron Golem. It's also worth pointing out that when it comes to bringing cards back from the graveyard, red isn't usually good at doing that, but when it comes to artifacts, you do have cards like Trash for Treasure, along with Goblin Welder and that Duretti loyalty ability, where you can easily sacrifice an artifact to bring an artifact back to the battlefield. Out of a lot of the mono red strategies, I think artifacts are pretty underrated. And number 4 is the obvious, I think, going into this color. What is the strength? The strength is burn. Burn to deal with planeswalkers, burn to deal with creatures, burn to deal with players, burn to win. It should be no surprise when you have a pretty solid mono red commander option in Torbrand Thane of Redfell. And not only that, but you get a benefit off of burning your opponents with other commanders like Neheb the Eternal, but easily if you're looking to include red in any deck. If you have a reliable creature presence, if you're playing anything like Reanimate or Blink, if you can get creature tokens out there for the ETB, something like Perforos, God of the Forge is a win con. You of course have some of the best removal in red, I would say, in Blasphemous Act. While you can't deal with Indestructibles, it's still going to deal 13 damage to each creature for a relatively low amount of mana. The fifth thing that you should know about Mono Red and Magic the Gathering is Chaos. Red is the best color for Chaos. Since you lack a lot of precision, you're going to just want to lean into the randomness. And because you're leaning into it, you're able to take advantage of it more so than some of your other opponents. One of my all-time favorite cards is Possibility Storm because you can build your deck around it in a way that other opponents and their decks are probably not going to be prepared for. So if you know that if you cast a creature, you're going to get another creature, your deck is going to be built so that you really get the benefit off of that. Same thing with instants and sorceries. You're probably not going to want to play a bunch of counterspells. While this isn't exactly the most commonly played strategy, it is most certainly an aspect about red you should be familiar with, seeing as it does tie in heavily with red's lack of precision. A lot of upside is going to be pretty chaotic. And then number 6 is the Forced Aggression strategy. A lot of combat strategies in mono red, because that's really one of the only ways you can win. You're either going to be burning them, or you're going to be attacking them. Red is unique because you have the ability to really take advantage of this by giving yourself additional combat steps, giving yourself even a line of defense against your opponents when they are attacking you, playing something like Kazul, Tyrant of the Cliffs. But looking at a card like Urabrask the Hidden, and I think it's true of looking at any of the Praetors, you get a good idea of what each individual mono color is supposed to do, or at least one aspect of that color well defined. So creatures you control have haste, and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Red takes advantage of forced combat, and red also takes advantage of combat in general. Very much about controlling pace with aggression. That's why you see, even outside of Commander, aggro decks just seem to remain relevant, no matter what year and standard it happens to be. And the last thing to know about mono red in Magic the Gathering is that there is a high risk for a high reward. Again, we're tying back into chaos, we're tying back into the lack of precision. Red doesn't really do a lot well compared to other colors in the game. Outside of combat, outside of burn, it's kind of a mystery to some people why anyone would want to, when looking on paper, play this color over other ones. But then you have to acknowledge the potential to go off, the potential to have some of the most powerful plays in red, along with the high risk going into that. Looking at a relatively newer card in Soulfire Eruption, you pay a whopping 9 mana, and you have the potential to really not do that much with the card in terms of burning away creatures, in terms of burning players. But if you have a ton of creatures to choose from, you're going to be exiling a number of cards off the top of your library that you will be able to play until the end of your next turn. So there's a high risk that the damage that you're going to be dealing to those targets is not enough, and there's also a risk that the cards that you're getting off the top of your library aren't going to be anything worth casting. Alternatively, they could be some of the best cards you could be dealing a ton of damage. And this even applies to a card I talked about earlier in Gamble. Best case scenario, you end up discarding a card that didn't matter, a card that you were hoping to discard. Worst case scenario, you end up discarding the card you searched up. So there's a high risk for a high reward of getting what you wanted for only paying 1 red mana. So anyway, I hope this video helped you out. If you were looking to understand red in Magic the Gathering, leave a like and a comment below. Again, please do subscribe, it does help the channel. Commander Void here, signing off. I will see you all next time.